speaking about and practicing a bit Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. Let's start with, I was like, well, first of all, you can, this prayer book, we'll do a bit of prayers on page 97. We'll do some short prayers. I think our copies are the same. Page 97. It should say on page 97 at the bottom, short mandala offering. Does it say that? Short mandala offering? No?
98 beginning.
Okay, 98 beginning. So, but first of all, we'll meditate a bit and generate a positive motivation. And then we'll come back to that and just do a couple of verses with prayers. Line with the custom. So first, just get comfortable. Body relax on your cushion. And gradually gather your awareness in. And observe your breath. And then visualize yourself surrounded by countless other sentient beings. So usually we begin with our mother and father of this life. If you like, you can imagine your mother of this life seated at your left. And then all of your other female friends and family, your aunts and grandmothers and sisters, all seated to your left and behind you, supporting you. Imagine that your immediate right, your father of this life, and then your other male friends and family. So your uncles or brothers, male friends and family, all to your right. And then briefly visualize those whom you're most prone to become upset or angry with, have a conflict with, seated directly in front of you, facing towards you. As a way of remembering to make special effort to practice patience and forgiveness, and put special effort into generating loving kindness and compassion for them. So imagine these antagonists seated in front, facing towards you. And all the other sentient beings, human beings, animals, and beings of the other realms, all in human form, seated all around you. For how you're interconnected with all of these sentient beings in this life and past lives, as well as future lives. Life to life, how you meet and connect with, interact with sentient beings in different forms. And then recall how just as oneself has a natural wish to be free from suffering and misery, so do all other sentient beings, one's mother, father, relatives, friends, and neighbors are the same and wishing to be free from different forms of suffering, misery, sickness, misfortune. Recognizing that generate compassion, wishing to free others from suffering. Also try to generate renunciation oneself, wishing to be free from the sufferings of not only this life, but also future lives, especially all of the suffering of samsara. So of taking rebirth and experiencing old age, sickness, and death again and again through the force of our karma. Wishing to be free from this whole cycle of death and rebirth, of renunciation. So wishing for oneself to be free from all the suffering of samsara is renunciation, whereas wishing that other sentient beings are free from every form of suffering, including all the suffering of samsara, is compassion, great compassion. Try to generate a degree of both of those. And then finally, recognizing that just to be free from suffering is not enough. We also need happiness and well-being and pleasant and joyful experiences. So we can wishing these for ourselves and wishing well-being and happiness for others is all the same, being love. Since so try to generate an attitude of love, wishing for one's own well-being and happiness in this life and future lives up to the fulfillment of our highest potential. And the same for our mother, all of our female friends and family, our father, our male antagonists, and all sentient beings, as far as we can spread that attitude out genuinely. Try to generate that. finally, in order to free oneself and all other sentient beings from suffering, and to develop one's own and others' potential for unimaginable joy, happiness, and well-being, then the best thing we can do is strive to achieve full enlightenment in order to benefit others. So try to think, therefore, in order to give the greatest possible benefit to countless kind mother sentient beings. The self must achieve full enlightenment. Therefore, I'll engage in this session this afternoon on Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. But then we can use the prayers from the prayer book. So at the top of page 98, I believe, or the bottom 97, short mandala offering. We'll just read that verse in English and then some refuge in bodhicitta that follows. This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field offered by all sentient beings. Enjoy this pure land. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, until the Buddha, the Dharma, other merits I create for listening to the Dharma. Go for refuge until I'm enlightened, the Buddha, the Dharma. Go until I achieve enlightenment, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Other merits I create to explain. Okay. So, yeah, so Shanti and Dipti requested me to explain the Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga this session. So I'll try to do that. But I think, yeah. How many of you is your first time to the center, to CKSL? Are any of you brand new? No? You've all been here before? Okay, good. How many of you are I mean, I know some of the old students, Shanti and Archana, are familiar with Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga a bit, but are the rest of you, do you know anything about Lama Tsongkhapa? Or Lama Tsongkhapa, you know a bit about. What? Is there a picture there? I can't see. Oh, the statues. Yeah, the statues here. There's also there's a nice painting up here. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I'll try to make some introductory remarks. We have about an hour and a half left. So, and then, yeah, if you have any questions along the way, let me know and I'll try to fill in. But on the Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. Well, Guru Yoga, I mean, typically is a kind of genre of practices, Guru Yoga. Or yoga in this case means, of course, not physical exercises. It basically means like meditation, like a series of meditations that you do in relation to your guru, right? And you do in order to bring your mind closer to the mind of the guru, and in order to create merit by making offerings to the guru. In Buddhism, and in Buddhism, I mean, generally the mark of oneself, like becoming a Buddhist, is taking refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha, right? Formally kind of recognizing that for oneself personally, the Buddha, the teacher, the Buddha, and his teachings of the Dharma, and then the spiritual community that are committed to following and upholding the Buddhist teachings in the world, the Sangha. So when one personally decides that I'm going to turn to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha for guidance in my spiritual life, right? Then by that one, that's basically going for refuge, and by that one becomes a Buddhist. So also a practice that we do is Buddhist because we do within refuge, going for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. So that's why at the beginning of a session like this, then one of the things we do first is go for refuge and read like we just read the refuge prayer. Of course, just reading the refuge prayer is not actually going for refuge. It's more one develops in his mind. But reading the words kind of help us to remember that. But then in well, especially I guess, how do you say? Because then how is the guru related to that, right? So because of course we now Shakyamuni Buddha, the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha passed away a long time ago. So we can't actually meet the Buddha, right? So then for, since the time Buddha passed away, then we still take refuge in the Buddha, but to receive the kind of personal instruction and advice, like face-to-face teachings and advice in the way that the Buddha gave during his lifetime, we rely upon someone else, a guru, right? So during Shakyamuni Buddha's lifetime, of course, he was a perfect guru. But then, and even during Shakyamuni Buddha's lifetime, many of his other disciples, like Shariputra, Moggallana, many other Buddhist disciples, Mahakashyapa and Ananda, they all served as teachers in their own right. Actually, it was about 10 years after the Buddha became enlightened that he formally gave permission for his other students to give ordination, right? To give refuge vows and also to give the vows of a monastic. So the Buddha himself formally gave permission for other students to serve as teachers, right? In order that, because the Buddha, as he's one person, he can't go to every place in India, and there are many people who couldn't come from afar to see the Buddha, like to take ordination, for instance. So the Buddha gave instruction for what's called the current ritual for ordination, but gave instruction how for his other followers to themselves serve as teachers. So similarly, like now when we seek instruction, we go to teachers like His Holiness the Dalai Lama or other teachers. And so they serve as a teacher. So in a way, like they're a representative of the Buddha. They're performing a similar function as the Buddha did. And then of course the Buddha's teachings and the Sangha are still the same. But especially in the tantric side of Buddhism. So Buddhism possesses both teachings and practices to do with the sutra and tantra aspects of Buddhism, sutra and tantra aspect. But in order, just like in sutra, to formally become Buddhist, one takes refuge, and usually one does that formally in relation to a teacher in a refuge ceremony, right? And that's kind of the entrance to the sort of formal entrance to sutra teachings of Buddha, to practicing the sutra teachings of the Buddha. Whereas to practice the tantric teachings of the Buddha, the formal entry is taking an initiation, taking a tantric initiation, right? And that's done on the basis of first having refuge and bodhisattva vows, or at least aspiring bodhicitta. And then on the basis of that, one can take tantric initiation. So again, just like in taking refuge, if you participate in a ceremony where you formally take refuge that's conducted by a teacher, that can be a lay teacher or an ordained teacher. Usually it's an ordained teacher. But then that teacher who's given you refuge vows, they formally become one of your teachers, right? And they're responsible to guide you, and you're responsible for showing them respect in a similar way that you would show to the Buddha, right, who gave refuge. So similarly, in the entrance to Tantra is taking an initiation. So an initiation is something that needs to be taken from a person. You can't just take from a statue or, I don't know, recording or something like that. It needs to be taken from a live person. So if you take an initiation from a person and they bestow the initiation, then the two of you develop this special relationship, a guru-chela relationship, teacher-disciple relationship. That's just part of, giving and receiving an initiation. So, that's especially important in Tantra because just like the Buddha, the initiation a teacher gives is not just something they made up or they kind of created and just decided to do, like a drama or something, like a play. But it's something that they receive from their teacher. Their teacher received from their teacher on back in an unbroken lineage, or unbroken chain to Shakyamuni Buddha himself. Right? So Shakyamuni Buddha himself appeared in different aspects and gave initiations, tantric initiations. So one function of the guru is to themselves, when they're training as a student, then to receive the blessing of that lineage. So that lineage of teachings, just like also in the sutra, there's a lineage of transmission of sutras. There's a lineage of transmission of initiations, the tantric aspects of Buddhism. So that blessing, that lineage, because it comes in an unbroken chain that was passed down from generation to generation, from teacher to student, beginning with Shakyamuni Buddha himself, then carries a blessing, right? So, so one of the purposes of Guru Yoga is to keep one's connection with one's guru, whether it's in the context of like having taken refuge in practicing sutra teachings, or if it's in context of having taken initiations or tantric vows in the context of tantra. So in order to receive the blessing of the transmission that's been passed down, because it comes directly, again, because we can't receive these transmissions directly from Shakyamuni Buddha himself. So we rely upon another, a person who we trust, who has received those transmissions, and that person then becomes, if we receive a teaching from them, and we want to, and we ourselves decide that we're going to take them as a teacher, then we develop this guru-disciple relationship with them. They become one of our teachers, our gurus. So in order to receive the blessing, then it's important to have a pure attitude toward that person. If we take someone as a teacher and then later we see a lot of faults in them, or we project a lot of faults, then that kind of obscures, that sort of sullies the relationship. It destroys the kind of relationship, and it sullies our ability to, it hampers our ability to receive the blessing, and that hampers our ability to generate realizations. So the whole purpose of guru devotion is to train in seeing our teachers in a pure way, right? And seeing not only our immediate teachers, but their teachers and their teachers' teachers, and the whole lineage of teachers from whom teachings are coming to us, to see that in a pure way, and also in relation to that. And that's in a way, that's something that's like more sacred than the Buddha Dharma Sangha, because it's a guru is the embodiment of the Buddha Dharma Sangha in a way that is especially suited to us, in a way that is can directly give instruction and guidance and inspiration and serve as a role model for us. So and this is uncommon to the Sanskrit tradition of Buddhism. I would say, like in the Pali or the Theravada tradition or the Pali canon of Buddhism, you don't find this emphasis on guru. Even in the Chinese transmission of Buddhism, I think it's also, I'm not so familiar with, but I think it is a bit there, but not as strongly. It's much more strong in the Tibetan tradition of Buddhism, because the Tibetan tradition of Buddhism is heavily influenced by the tantric teachings of Buddhism that existed in ancient India, and were transmitted, in more or less in full to Tibet, largely because of its, its geographical proximity, because there was this kind of intercourse, this communication between the Tibetans and the teachers of Buddhist masters of ancient India over quite some hundreds of years, quite a long time. Then many of the tantric teachings that existed in ancient India, which were not accepted by followers of the Theravada tradition as the actual word of Buddha, and they weren't disseminated to China for various reasons, largely because there just weren't teachers from India going to China and students from China coming to India to receive those teachings. Whereas there were many teachers from India going to Tibet, and many students from Tibet coming to India to receive teachings and then take them back, translate them from Sanskrit into Tibetan, and then take them back to Tibet. So that's why, in short, why Tibetan Buddhism is largely colored by not only the sutra, not only the sutra aspect of Buddhist teachings, but also the tantric aspects. And again, in the tantric aspect, because initiation is so important, and then also because many of the tantric teachings of Buddha are very cryptic. They're very difficult to understand. So without depending upon a guru to help you interpret, to understand how to interpret and sort of extract the meaning. And what are the practices to be done? It's impossible to practice. Yeah, and that kind of that sort of the tantric teachings being kind of cryptic in that way, it keeps them secret, right? So it keeps it so that those who are not qualified to practice them are unable to practice because they can't know like what to do. But it's like and that's sort of that secrecy is in order to keep those who are not qualified safe, right? Because there's a big danger that if one hasn't gone through the appropriate like foundational training, and then one just jumps right into sort of very high level like esoteric practices that have to do with meditating on the chakras and manipulating the winds in the body, then it can cause a lot of harm, right? And it can actually be counterproductive. Yeah. So in short, Guru Yoga is a set of practices whereby we remember our Guru in different ways. Remember the kindness of the Guru. Remember the qualities of our Guru, and then generate a mind of faith, like relating to the Guru with faith, and then we make offerings, confess our misdeeds, and request blessings, right? Request blessings to grow on the path. So I know so here this evening we're talking about Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. So why? Yeah, there's many different Guru Yogas. So we can do Guru Yoga in relation to Shakyamuni Buddha, for example. There's Guru Yoga in relation to Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, any Buddhist master or any deity in relation to like Tara, or Medicine Buddha or Avalokiteshvara, or in relation to one's own guru, like there's a Dalai Lama, in relation to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, or Geshe Damdo, or whatever teachers you might have. We practice guru devotion in relation to each of them, or all together. The essence of Guru Yoga is like this: is that whenever we think of the Buddha or a Buddha, we think that's my guru appearing in that form, and whenever we think of our guru, we relate that to the Buddha. We think this is the Buddha appearing in ordinary form. So the essence of Guru Yoga is to see, Shakyamuni Buddha and all other, Buddhas, Medicine Buddha or Para or Avalokiteshvara, to see them all as being one essence, one entity with our guru, and to see our gurus as being one essence with the Buddha, and then also to recognize. So I mean that's the main thing, but then also to connect to us personally. We see them as sort of, it's like the fullest development of our own potential. Like that's one unique thing about Buddhism among other religions in the world, other maybe systems of belief or spiritual practice, is that in Buddhism, especially in Mahayana Buddhism, it's very clearly held based on very clear reasons, right? That each and every sentient being, so each oneself, each human being, each animal, each kind of spirit or ghost or hell being or whatever kind of sentient being exists, any being with a mind, has the potential to achieve full enlightenment, right? So it has the potential to achieve the exact same level of realization as Shakyamuni Buddha, or as Lama Tsongkhapa, or as His Holiness the Dalai Lama, right? So not only when we to practice Guru Yoga means seeing any enlightened being as being one essence with the Guru, and our Guru as being one essence with enlightened beings. They're just appearing in different forms. Usually our Gurus appear in a more ordinary form as an ordinary person who's born in a certain place and it's grows old and then passes away. And they're not like radiating lights and flying in the sky or something like that. They appear in a quite ordinary aspect, but that's according to our karma and according to like what we can relate to. So not only, so Guru Yoga again means essentially seeing, when we see a Buddha, we see, we have the understanding that all those, that enlightening, the Buddha is one essence with my teacher. When we see our teacher, we have the understanding, we train in the understanding that they're one essence with the enlightened beings. And both of those are, they're the expression of my own potential, right? That oneself has the potential to be just like that. So by relating to, like in this case, Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga, relating to Tsongkhapa. So when we do Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga, we visualize Lama Tsongkhapa in the space in front, but then see Lama Tsongkhapa as being in essence with our own, actual teachers of this life. Like His Holiness Dalai Lama or Lama Zopa Rinpoche or other teachers. And we see them as, and we recognize that by relating to Tsongkhapa in a pure way, making offerings, making prostrations, confessing our misdeeds, and then making a request to bless our mind stream, that has the effect of developing our own inner potential to achieve enlightenment, to achieve the exact same state of spiritual realization as Lama Tsongkhapa has achieved, right? Or as, and any other enlightenment achieved. So that's kind of the essence of Guru Yoga is that. Yeah. You have any questions about that? Have you heard that kind of explanation before? About Guru Yoga? Yes. Yeah. But that, this Pabongkar Rinpoche says in his Lamrim that probably two of the most difficult realizations to develop from among the realizations of the graduated path to enlightenment, the Lamrim, are that all sentient beings have been one's mother, right? Seeing all sentient beings as having been one's kind mother, and also seeing the Guru as Buddha. So this is so. When I'm speaking about, the practicing Guru Yoga, seeing the Guru as a Buddha, it's not something that comes easily. It's not something that comes naturally, but rather it's something that we train, right? So, for us at a beginner level, then Guru Yoga is something we have to put effort into, practice seeing, our own teachers in a pure way. Something I found very helpful when I was a new monk, one very junior monk, Australian monk, said to me, well, one Shakya Lama said to him, this kind of made an offhand comment, like, eventually we have to see all sentient beings in a pure way. So why not start with our Guru, right? So because all sentient beings, just like us, every other sentient being has the potential to achieve full enlightenment, to be completely purified or free from every fault, every misbehavior, every form of ignorance, every form of illness or suffering, because all of those come about on the basis of some kind of impurity, impure understanding, impure behavior, imprints of past impure actions and karma. So all the faults that we have come about in dependence upon kind of some sort of mistakes that we made. But it's just like water, water that is polluted. The pollution is never one essence with the water. You can always separate it out. So the natural purity of the water is what is present when it's polluted, it's in an unmanifest form. But when the pollutants are purified out of the water, then the purity becomes manifest. So similarly, sentient beings, we all have the potential for full enlightenment, elimination of all faults, and especially the development of all positive qualities. The development of infinite patience, infinite clear understanding, infinite love, loving kindness and affection, infinite compassion and generosity, and infinite energy to engage in, to continuously engage in activity to benefit sentient beings. So we have all of that potential within us. So the more that but it's like our power of identification. I mean, well, our mind of identifying what we identify with is something very powerful, right? So when we identify with our own faults, then it can make us feel that it's impossible to overcome them. They seem like huge thing. When we focus our attention on our own faults, then we can easily lose sight of our positive qualities, and we can lose sight of our potential to overcome those faults. If we identify too strongly with, we all make mistakes, but the more we identify strongly with that, then it can lead us to feel like I'm fundamentally a mistaken thing, a mistaken person. I'm fundamentally faulty. There's no way to overcome that. And that becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy then, right? It's like, because we identify so strongly with our faults, that undermines our ability to do anything to overcome them. Because it's like we teach ourselves to believe that is our nature. It's just to be faulty. And if we believe our nature is faulty, then there's very little space to see how, or to even feel like it's worth the effort to try to, eliminate those faults, eliminate those mistakes. So it's a very powerful thing. So practicing guru devotion in relation to what this monk said, because eventually we need to see all sentient beings in a pure way. So why not start with the one that we're turning to for spiritual guidance, right? The guru. So eventually we need to, it's like by identifying with our own positive, we all have positive qualities, right? So by recognizing our own positive qualities, our abilities, our intelligence, our kindness, our natural empathy for others, our generosity, our creativity, our appreciation of beauty, we all have positive qualities. So by identifying with our positive qualities, it reinforces those. Just like when we identify with our faults, it reinforces those. When we identify with our positive qualities, it reinforces those. So we want to it's very beneficial for us, and then indirectly or directly, it's beneficial for others when we identify with our positive qualities, because it gives energy. It's like it feeds energy to our positive qualities, and thereby they grow, right? So, and it's the same in relation to other sentient beings. If in relation to other sentient beings we see faults, then it's like it's just like if we're associated with people like friends or family or classmates who they only see faults in us, we feel how it undermines our self-confidence and undermines our sense of ability to do things, right? We want to get away, we want to run away or kind of hide or be separated from those people, or we don't have the confidence or the kind of courage to try anything new or creative in the presence of people who see faults in us. So it undermines our ability to grow in a positive way. So similarly, when we do that, it's the same. When we relate to others, when we focus excessively on the faults in others. I mean, of course, there is an appropriate and constructive way to address the faults we see in others. As parents, you have to do that all the time. I've never been a parent, but I can see with my sister and my brother-in-law, and other parents relating to my own parents. Yeah, as a teacher or a parent or a kind of mentor for someone, one of the major responsibilities they have is to point out the faults and address and try to help overcome the problems or misbehavior that their children are dealing with, right? But when we just see, just looking at the faults of others without that underlying care, right, and wish to benefit, but just looking at faults in a critical way, in a way that's like demeaning or insulting or putting down, then that's very destructive. It's very destructive when we do that in relation to ourselves. It's very destructive when we do it in relation to others. So eventually, an enlightened being, yes, they see the faults of all sentient beings, but in a way that a loving parent sees the faults of their children, with a wish to help them overcome those faults. But primarily, they put more energy into seeing the positive potential, seeing the positive qualities that other sentient beings already have, and especially seeing the potential for increasing those positive qualities up to full enlightenment and putting more attention and into that, right? So that's how it's important to see all sentient beings in a pure way, means seeing the pure positive qualities, and then beyond that, the potential for further development of those positive qualities, all the way up to enlightenment that we ourselves have and that other sentient beings have, and really focusing almost exclusively on that, right? So when we say, eventually we have to feel all sentient beings in a pure way, it's like by the kind of extreme of seeing or focusing on the positive quality of sentient beings, all sentient beings, is imagining that all sentient beings have already fully developed that positive quality, right? And seeing them in as the full development of their highest potential, already seeing them in that kind of their purest potential, right? Seeing sentient beings in the aspect of the full development of their purest potential is and which essentially means seeing all sentient beings as enlightened. The full development of our purest potential is, our enlightenment. So, but again, that's very difficult to do, right? So, if we start with, who should it be easiest to see in a pure way? Our guru, right? Because they're the one that we feel they're like the Buddha was to, the Buddha's direct disciples. They're like the Buddha to me, right? They're the one who's my mentor, my role model, my guide, sort of giving me instructions and showing me the path and helping me, follow the path to the fulfillment of my own potential. So by looking at the guru in a pure way, we're practicing not only seeing the guru in a pure way as a manifestation of enlightened energy, you could say, but we're practicing learning to see ourselves in a pure way, and we're also practicing learning to see all other sentient beings in a pure way, right? And we're leading, that practice of relating to the guru in a pure way, then is leading us and leading all of the sentient beings to enlightenment. Right? So that's why Guru Yoga is, it's often called the heart of the path, right? The essence of the Buddhist path. But again, it's something quite, in a way, it's quite unique to the Tibetan tradition of Buddhism that comes from ancient India. It's not something the Tibetans created. Some in the past, some Western Buddhist scholars used to call Tibetan Buddhism Lamaism. The word for guru in Tibetan is Lama. Right? Lama means La means like a pass, a mountain pass, or something very high, and Ma means mother. So Lama means very high mother. The meaning being that the guru is someone who cares for us like a very kind mother, but a fully enlightened mother. In the past, some Western the scholars used to call Tibetan Buddhism Lamaism because they saw the strong presence of this yoga within Buddhism and didn't see in other Chinese or Theravada Buddhism. So they thought, that maybe the Tibetans just made it up. But actually, that was because they didn't have understanding of Buddhist Tantra. So His Holiness, in the early days when I was very new Buddhist, His Holiness used to address that issue a lot and say, actually, it's improper and incorrect to call Tibetan Buddhism Lamaism as if it's something that Tibetans made up, because it's that practice of giving importance to the guru and seeing the guru as an enlightened being and going for refuge to the guru is something that it's part of ancient Indian Buddhism, right? It's something that Tibetans inherited from ancient Indian Buddhists. and it has valid source in Tantras actually taught by the Buddha himself. So when I took, I went, I first studied Buddhism in Asia in 1998. In the Theravada tradition, and then some friends I met there suggested that if I wanted to follow the path of compassion, to check out Tibetan Buddhism. So then I came to Nepal, and then late 1998, and then early 1999, I took refuge with my first Tibetan teacher, Lama Tsongkhapa, who's a former abbot of Kuban. And then soon after I took refuge with Lama Tsongkhapa, then I went to ask him for advice. And that time, I was attending some teachings also by like Nyingma Kagyu teachers around Bodha and Nepal, Stupa. And yeah, their style is quite different. Their way of presenting the Buddhism is quite different than the sort of traditional Gelugpa style that I experienced at Kopan Monastery. So I was a bit in two minds, like which, to try to follow both, or which tradition to follow. I asked Lama Tsongkhapa for advice, and he kind of leaned forward and said, "Tsongkhapa." just Tsongkhapa. And I never heard of Tsongkhapa really before, maybe a little bit, but the way he said it, I was like, huh, like that's something. It sounds impressive, but I'm not sure what. It was a bit mystical too. Like he said Tsongkhapa, and then then that time I was just my main practices were like refuge and the four measurables and Jorcho Lama Chopa. But then about a year later or so, I asked him for other practices when I started learning Tibetan. And the first thing he told me to memorize in Tibetan, when you learn Tibetan, especially as a monastic, I was a new monk then, is memorization is very important. You memorize a lot of prayers, like your daily prayers that you do every day. It's one of the first things you memorize. So the first thing he told me to memorize was Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga, what I'm supposed to be teaching tonight, Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. So that's the first thing I memorized in Tibetan. And so one of the early practices that I started doing, practicing Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. But since then, especially, in the Geshe studies program, well, I mean, during the Geshe studies program, you learn a lot about Lama Tsongkhapa, right? First probably we study the mind-only school, Lama Tsongkhapa's presentation of the mind-only school tenets from the Essence of Eloquence on text. And then, right, I mean, Lama Tsongkhapa's writings, especially in English, I'm not sure it comes out so clearly, but in Tibetan, it's incredible. The way he writes is so deep, so clear, and extremely profound. And he always goes back to, he always goes back to that's one unique feature about Tsongkhapa's writing is he always goes back to the Indian sources, especially like you can see very clearly one of Tsongkhapa's earliest and most profound works is the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, Lama Tsongkhapa, which we have in the library here. I encourage you to have a look if you haven't. But the great treatise on the stages of the path for enlightenment. Even before I learned Tibetan, just reading that in English, I kind of look at it again and again, read different sections again and again. There's a pattern to each section. Say one of the first sections is a section on Guru devotion. Then there's a section on Krishna Rebirth. Then a section on impermanence and death, and on and on and on. The section, at the end, there's a section on generosity, the section on practicing patience. So each major section, each major topic that Tsongkhapa presents, he begins with sutras. What did Shakyamuni Buddha say about this, right? And then he goes to the commentaries of the earliest Indian commentators, then how did Nagarjuna? So what you have what Shakyamuni Buddha said in different sutras, and then how did Nagarjuna or Aryadeva or Buddha Palita, these early Indian Buddhist masters, how did they interpret that? What Shakyamuni Buddha said, and then later Indian masters like Shantideva or Chandrakirti, and one of the latest Atisha, how did they interpret that? And then you look at the Tibetan Buddhist masters and start again with the earlier ones like Longchen Rabjampa or or some of the Shakya Pandita. And then finally, he'll give his own kind of synopsis of each main point, right? And the Kadamba Geshe is leaving out. He often quotes from the Kadamba Geshe. So that's one, I mean, and he's very methodical about that. I mean, you can see that's the way, as a practitioner himself, you can see that his real desire was to find authentic Buddhist teachings. Because, Tsongkhapa is one of the last, he's like a reformer in the history of Tibetan Buddhism. He's one of the last major figures to arise of the four schools of Tibetan Buddhism. Nyingma is the oldest, right? He's the old school. Then after that, it's the Shakya, and then the Kagyu, and then the youngest is the Gelugpa. So Lama Tsongkhapa, most of his teachers were from the Shakya tradition. Some Kagyu, maybe a few Nyingma teachers also. But he's looking at this history of Tibetan Buddhism, and then the history of larger, Buddhism also as it came from ancient India, and Shakyamuni Buddha himself. And in his day, he saw that he felt that there's a lot of errors that had arisen in the Tibetan practice of Buddhism, because from generation to generation, they hadn't continually made the effort to keep going back to the source teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha himself and the sutras and the tantras and the early Indian masters. Because there's a tendency it's kind of a natural human tendency probably to, as any teacher, it's like you want to make things easier for your students. So in Buddhism, there's a tendency for, like the early early translators of the Buddhist texts into Tibetan. They actually went to Tibet, studied Sanskrit and other ancient Indian languages, Pali, and then translated texts and brought them back to Tibet. So they're very much in touch with the source material. But then they teach to a whole generation of students who don't know Sanskrit, don't know Indian source language, but still they're based on the same treaties. And then maybe those early Tibetan masters themselves write a commentary. But then their students, out of laziness, probably, they just study their own teacher's commentary, but they don't go back to the source material, right? And then after several generations of that, mistakes can creep in, right? And also the understanding isn't very broad or isn't very deep, because it becomes the students are just practicing a pith instruction, a very brief, essential instruction that they inherit from their teacher without really knowing, like, how is that related to something the Buddha actually taught, and what's the broader context for that practice. And then different mistakes creep in. So that's why Tsongkhapa in his life, he made a great effort to go back to the Kangyur, the translated word of the Buddha, and the Tengyur, the translated works of the ancient Indian masters, and then also look at the kind of lineage of Tibetan interpretation of those, and then based on logic, reasoning and logic and scriptural reference, sorting out what are valid interpretations of how to practice each step of the path, and what are invalid interpretations. So what's the best way to practice? And then by teaching in that way, Tsongkhapa, that's why the Gelugpa tradition became so widespread, because people found it very helpful, and they found that by that kind of the clarity of Tsongkhapa's instructions, then many people were able to quickly generate realizations, insight, and clear understanding, and then actual experience of the path and realizations on the path. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what Lama Nunda sort of meant when he leaned forward to me and said Tsongkhapa, because he's familiar with this whole tradition. He's a great, great scholar, a great Buddhist master, and I was just totally new person. But he's he's kind of trying to drive home the point just by the way he says the name Tsongkhapa, that this is a really incredible Buddhist master and one that you should rely upon. Although I'm quite a skeptical person, so I didn't just take it at face value. I kept studying a bit other traditions and looking at what Tsongkhapa and other teachers teach and kind of comparing. Although not as much as I'd like to, I'd still like to look at the works of masters from other traditions and compare. Well, one of my own teachers, Geshe, who's also taught here at CKSL, when we were first studying the Essence of Eloquence by Tsongkhapa, and he was reading it together with us a few times a week. And he was saying, because he's actually someone who's, he's much more comfortable with Tibetan, and actually his family in his connected, because he's born into a quite old family from Tibet who've been in Nepal for many generations. I think long before 1959. And some of his relatives, I think his grandfather or something, are recognized lamas, gurus in the Nyingma Kagyu tradition. So he's a bit familiar with other traditions, much more than I am. But he was saying when you read the works by other Buddhist scholars before Tsongkhapa, you see how uncommon Tsongkhapa is, and just extremely clear and very clear logic, and also very also drawing on the richness of and the breadth of the sutras and the tantras and the ancient Indian commentaries, and assimilating and interpreting them in an extremely sort of clear way. Yeah, so I better say something about Lama Tsongkhapa Guru, or actually how to practice Lama Tsongkhapa Guru. Yeah. So let me see. We have a copy here in the prayer book. Oh, actually, there might be. There might not be. To send online. Are you all on the WhatsApp group?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll send to there. I have it. Send, Shanti, can you send our channel in the WhatsApp group? Or Shanti, can you send something to the WhatsApp group? Okay. I'll send to you.
Anyone is not in the WhatsApp group, there's a platform.
Yeah.
Just in chat. Okay. Shall we have some hard copies if you can just confirm that that's the correct version?
Yeah,
We can
that's
distribute them.
yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
We can use it. Can I have one?
Yeah, of course.
There's enough.
I think there's some more there, so we'll try
Okay.
to.
Oh, great.
Oh, great. Amazing.
Smart. Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. Yeah, so just to, I mean, maybe just to say a couple more things about Lama Tsongkhapa. So he's the founder of the Gelug school of Tibetan Buddhism. Um, Actually, I wanted to point out this, and he was, there's a prophet, the Buddha actually prophesied his coming. I'll read you this passage. In the Manjushri root tantra. So Lama Tsongkhapa has a special connection with the Buddha of wisdom, right? Manjushri. So there's a root tantra related to Manjushri, a Manjushri root tantra that was taught by Shakyamuni Buddha. So in that tantra, Shakyamuni Buddha made a prophecy about Tsongkhapa, saying that that after the Buddha passed away, over 1,000 years after the Buddha passed away, then in the snow land, meaning in Tibet, there would be a monk who would come and found a great monastery called Early Joyous, or Ganden Monastery. So in that root tantra, then it said that Shakyamuni Buddha made well, in the tantra, it seems Shakyamuni Buddha is speaking to Manjushri and saying that, after I pass away, that Manjushri, you will appear as an ordinary being and found a monastery called Ganden. So in the Gelugpa school, among Tsongkhapa's direct disciples and later disciples, then Tsongkhapa is commonly held to be a human manifestation of Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom. During Tsongkhapa's life, in his 30s, in his 30s, and then from that time onwards, he developed a very special connection with the Buddha Manjushri, such that he could see him appearing just like we can see an ordinary person and have discussions with him and ask questions, especially ask questions on Manjushri about different aspects of especially with yoga emptiness, and also how to practice the path, how to develop realizations, how to practice tantra. So he received a lot of instructions and advice from Manjushri. But also, when Lama Tsongkhapa was about 36, by that time he'd already become a very famous teacher, one of the most famous teachers in central Tibet, and he was drawing many hundreds of monks and people would attend his teachings. And there was already a sense that he was sort of heading a revival of Buddhism in central Tibet, and that he would be a very important teacher. But at that time, when he was 36, then at that time he wasn't having direct visions of Manjushri yet, but he was relying upon this kind of mystical figure called Lama Tsongkhapa, who was a nomad from Kham. And Lama Tsongkhapa, he didn't have much education. He was, from the time he was a young boy, he was mostly a shepherd, tending after flocks of sheep and yaks in Tibet. but he spontaneously had visions of Manjushri from when he was a very young boy. Lama Umapa did. But Lama Umapa always had a doubt about these visions of Manjushri he had, because he himself wasn't very well educated, so he didn't really know how to check if this vision was just a hallucination or if it was actually a deity, a Buddha appearing to him. So, so Lama Tsongkhapa, I mean, but this vision of Manjushri that Lama Umapa was having told him, that you should go request in the initiation of Saraswati. So Saraswati is a goddess common to the Hindu and the Buddhist pantheon both. And Buddhism is a goddess of wisdom and composition, poetry. So Lama Tsongkhapa had a very strong connection with Saraswati from the time he was very young. He did a retreat on Saraswati when he was like 10 or 11 or 12 or something, and had a vision of her, and then had a strong connection ever since. It's said that Lama Tsongkhapa was also a great poet. There's one reason he became a very famous teacher is because not only he could teach and explain well, but he composed very well, and not only composed like explanations, but also composed like spiritual poetry very eloquently. So, and many say that's due to the blessing of Saraswati from when he was young. But this Lama Umapa, one of his visions of Manjushri told him, you should go request Lama Tsongkhapa, Losang Drakpa, for a Saraswati initiation. So he went to central Tibet and sought out Tsongkhapa, and then requested him for initiation. And Tsongkhapa gave him the initiation. But then Tsongkhapa heard from some of his other students that this person, Lama Umapa, he has these visions of Manjushri. And he would like to ask if they're real or hallucination, some kind of, delusion. So Tsongkhapa said, sure, I'll help. So then Tsongkhapa met with Lama Umapa and then told him, ask these appearances you have of Manjushri, ask him these questions, this question, about the view of emptiness and various difficult points in Buddhist teachings. But then each time Manjushri would give a perfect answer. And Tsongkhapa concluded that, actually it's a valid, you are actually, the Buddha or the Bodhisattva Manjushri is actually appearing to you. So then Tsongkhapa himself started to ask his own questions through Umapa, because at that time he couldn't see. So he would tell Umapa, ask Manjushri this and then see what answer comes. So back to this time when Tsongkhapa was about 36. So that was probably around, Tsongkhapa was like 34, 35. That was happening. Then around the time he was 36, so Lama Tsongkhapa gained more and more confidence in this, in Manjushri, and the Manjushri's guidance coming through Lama Umapa. So when he was about 36, then Manjushri told Tsongkhapa, you need to go into retreat. You should stop your teaching activities and go do a retreat, just like solitary, strict retreat. And that time, one of Tsongkhapa's main teacher was the Shakya Lama Rendawa, Jetsun Rendawa. So I believe it was Jetsun Rendawa or one of Tsongkhapa's other teachers said, but if you go do retreat now, it'll be great harm to the Buddhist teachings because you're teaching so many people, you're benefiting so many people by giving such excellent explanations of the Buddhist teachings. Then it's better you wait a while and keep teaching. And so when Manjushri heard this, he said, I know what's best. Just go into a retreat. Don't ask any more questions. So at that time, Lama Tsongkhapa went into a retreat with 8 pure disciples in Olga. And for about 4 or 5 years, he went into retreat. But during that time, he went. Well, during that time, at one point, he was actually considering coming to India to receive teaching, because he thought that there were still great Buddhist masters alive in India, like in Nalanda or in Bodh Gaya, Vikramashiva. That time, although this is the late 1300s, Buddhism had already fully died out in India at that time, but he didn't know that. So I guess there wasn't very much correspondence between India and Tibet at that time. But on the way from central Tibet, on the way to the border, down to the, across the Himalayas, there's a southern area of Tibet called Lhota. Lo means south in Tibetan. So one great Nyingma master who was a holder of the Kadampa lineages of the Lamrim and the textual instruction lineages of the Kadam teachings. His name was Namka Gyaltsen. He's from that area, and he was a great yogi who had visions of Vajrapani, another Buddhist deity. So Vajrapani had told him, you should request Tsongkhapa to give teachings on Shanti Deva's compendium of trainings. What is it called in Sanskrit? Siksha Samachaya. Yeah. Shiksha Samachaya. So this Lord Namka Gyaltsen invited Tsongkhapa to come and teach. And when this is actually the point of my story was when they first met, it's a sign of respect for a teacher to go outside to meet another teacher you're inviting. Just like Archana and Shanti met me on the stairwell today when I was coming. But so Lord Namka Gyaltsen, he came out of his monastery to meet Lama Tsongkhapa in front of the monastery as Tsongkhapa was first approaching. And so it said when Lord Namka Gyaltsen first saw Tsongkhapa, he saw him appearing as Maitreya. And when Tsongkhapa first saw Lord Namka Gyaltsen, he saw him appearing as Vajrapani. They both had this, because of the purity of their own minds, they both had this kind of, and their close connection with these deities, they both had this kind of pure appearance of each other. So, in another way, it's also said Tsongkhapa was actually, in essence, Maitreya appearing in human form, although most commonly consider him as being an emanation of Manjushri. But some years ago, it was 2018. I met in 2016. Lama Tsongkhapa he taught the Lama Tsongkhapa Guru at Choe Khor Sum Ling in Diamond District. But in 2018, because around 2016, 17, 18, I was in the monastery program. I was studying the biography of Lama Tsongkhapa. These tangas you can see on the back wall behind you. And then all over the back wall, I guess, there are these images depicting, each one has Lama Tsongkhapa at the center, and then a lot of little scenes painted around. So those depict Lama Tsongkhapa's life. I've never checked these actually to make sure they're in the right order, but I should. Maybe this afternoon evening I can check. But they depict Lama Tsongkhapa's life. So Lama Tsongkhapa's biography is depicted in 15 paintings like that. So when I was studying in like 2016, 17, 18, as part of the monastery curriculum, we were studying Lama Tsongkhapa's biography, his life story. And within those tankas, there's very small descriptions written in gold. So I always thought, it'd be really nice to know what's written there and to be able to kind of see Tsongkhapa's life in images. It helps you remember the important events. So because Lama Tsongkhapa taught Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga here, then in 2018, I think it was, I asked Geshe, if he knew about, if it would be a good idea to translate the writing in the tankas. And then Rinpoche said, there's probably a text actually that has it all written out, so you don't have to try to read from the paintings. So I found the text and I translated it, and then offered to Rinpoche in 2019, I believe. But at that time, Rinpoche wanted that text published together with several other texts, a couple by Abonga Rinpoche and one by Tatsang Lotsawa, a famous Shakya translator, Tatsang Lotsawa, and then a couple other texts that describe the uncommon features of Tsongkhapa's teachings. So you could find all of those between Geshe Namdak and myself and Venerable Namjong. We published a whole group. We translated a whole group of texts within 1 year, quite quickly, and then offered to Rinpoche in 2019. Those can be found on the FPMT website now. But one of the uncommon features of Tsongkhapa's teachings, probably the three sort of main things that Tsongkhapa accomplished through his teaching and writing. One was to clarify the view of emptiness, right? Based on the logic and reasoning of that was refined by Dignaga and Dharmakirti in their works on pramana, on valid cognition. So based on using the reasonings taught by Dignan and Dharmakirti, and then analyzing the text of Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, Dignaga, sorry, Sangye Khyana, Buddha Palita, and who was the Sangye Khyana? Anyway, Buddha Palita and Chandrakirti, based on these scholars, Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti primarily, also Shantideva. Then Lama and the sutras, right? Lama Tsongkhapa very refined the correct view of emptiness, the highest view of emptiness, the prasangika, Madhyamaka prasangika view of emptiness. So he greatly clarified that in 5 different treatises that he wrote. And then the second thing Lama Tsongkhapa did was to clarify the method for generating single-point concentration. Well, not single-point concentration, but shine, calm abiding. Basically, a completely focused wisdom of meditation. Well, a meditative equipoise that is unwavering, completely undistracted. So there were some misconceptions about where before Lama Tsongkhapa in Tibet, many meditators, they would confuse a mind that's kind of polluted by or tainted by a subtle laxity. It's called a subtle, like, unclarity of mind. So the mind can be very focused and still, but there can be a subtle sort of unclarity which hinders further progress on the path and hinders developing realizations. So many meditators in Tibet were mistaking this sort of mind that's under the sway of subtle laxity for actual calm abiding, or shina, Tibetan calm abiding. So Lama Tsongkhapa clarified greatly the correct method according to the ancient Indian Buddhist treatise for how to generate a pure concentration. And then the third thing is how to generate the illusory body. So the illusory body is one of the realizations on the path of Tantra. This has to do with Tantra. But in short, though, in order for us to achieve full enlightenment, we need to achieve not only an enlightened mind, but also an enlightened physical form, right? Because an enlightened being, in order to benefit others, the main way they benefit others is by appearing and then by teaching, right? So just like we can't read in others' minds, if I were just to sit here and not say anything, it wouldn't benefit you at all, really, right? Even though I might be thinking very nice things, very beneficial things, because you can't read my mind, then I can't read your mind, then there's no communication, right? So for the Buddhists to communicate with sentient beings, they need to appear to them and they need to speak, right? So those are both physical things. A physical appearance and making sound, making speech are both physical, but both aspects of the physical body of the Buddha, right? So within the sutra teachings, it's very clearly described how to, especially with a correct understanding of emptiness, how to generate the enlightened mind. But it's not clearly described how to generate an enlightened body, the physical form. Because an enlightened being's mind and body are one entity, right? But our gross physical body is not one entity with our mind. They become separated at the time of death, right? So our physical body we have now becomes ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It merges with the elements of the time of death, and our stream of consciousness continues on. So it's easier to see how the stream of consciousness goes on to become enlightened. But what within us becomes an enlightened being's body, their physical form, which allows them to appear to sentient beings and teach. So that there was during Tsongkhapa's life, previous to Tsongkhapa, there was not a clear description like how to do that. So it's not the case that nobody became, no Tibetans became enlightened prior to Tsongkhapa. Because clearly, like Jetsun Milarepa, Sakya Pandita, Longchen Lajapa, there are many Tibetan Buddhist masters who became enlightened before Tsongkhapa. So they knew how to do this, but there was no clear explanation. And there were many misconceptions about actually how to generate the enlightenment of the Buddha's form body. It's called the physical aspect of the Buddha is called the form body. So that's one thing Tsongkhapa did, is going back to the sutras taught by the Buddha, especially the Guhya Samaja Sutra, then he very clearly explained how to generate an enlightened body together with enlightened mind as one entity. So that's called the illusory body, right? Because the body of the Buddha is like a rainbow in the sky, like it appears as something kind of solid and there, but if you go try to touch it, then it's not there. So it's just an appearance. Just like a rainbow is a very clear appearance, independent of one causing conditions. A Buddha's enlightened form is an appearance, especially and I mean when it appears in an ordinary form, like a human body, like his Holiness Dalai Lama's body or Lama Tsongkhapa's body, it looks completely ordinary. It's not like a rainbow and then you go try to touch it and your hand goes through it. Not like that. Everything appears completely ordinary, but it's not. It's a manifestation of the enlightened physical and mental energy of the. So, yeah. So those are some special features of Tsongkhapa. So now, let's look at the Guru Yoga. So in this Guru Yoga, like on page, there's preliminary aspects added at the beginning. Like on page, I'm not sure, does it have page numbers? Anyways, page 3, where it says Lama Tsongkhapa, daily Guru Yoga meditation, the refuge and bodhicitta verse, and then the meditation on the 4 immeasurable thoughts. Those are added. So we'll skip over those today. And then on page 5, there's generating special bodhicitta. So this is meditating on bodhicitta, similar to what we did at the beginning of the session. And then on page 6 at the top is purifying the place. So that again, it comes from the preliminary practices of Georgia, where you imagine the space that you're meditating in to be like completely pure and free of any faults. And then as in Lama Tsongkhapa's style, to make extensive offerings from the very beginning. So he has his offering prayer at the bottom at the midway through 6, and then on page 7, the offering cloud mantra and the extensive power of truth. So we'll skip over all of that and go to page 8. So on page 8 is the actual practice of, and you can see it says introduction. And then the very first line there, Ganden Lha Gyama. So the Tibetan. Everyone see where we are? Page 8. Ganden Lha Gyama. So the first 4 syllables, Ganden Lha Gyama. So in Tibetan, as is common with many texts, the text is called after its first 4 syllables. So this text is commonly called Ganden Lha Gyama in Tibetan. Ganden meaning Ganden is the Tibetan for Tushita in Sanskrit. Tushita is the pure land of Maitreya Buddha. So the way the visualization here is that that what one visualizes like Maitreya Buddha in his pure land, in kind of the heaven above, way above the earth, sitting on top of clouds, and then Maitreya Buddha, and then on either side, on one side is Atisha, on his right side is Atisha, on his left side is Lama Tsongkhapa, and then from the heart of Maitreya Buddha comes a stream of golden light beams, or like a cloud, like a white curd almost, like a white fluffy cloud. And then in front of Maitreya is kind of an array of clouds, and then on top of that is Lama Tsongkhapa. So it's as if Lama Tsongkhapa is an emanation of Maitreya Buddha. It's coming from Maitreya's heart. So Ganden is the Ganden Lha Gyama. Ganden is the name of Maitreya's pure land, and then La means deity, or celestial being, God, and then Gya means 100, right? So it's the idea is that, as it says here, you who emanate from the heart of the Savior of the 100 Devas' joyful realm. So the joyful realm is an English translation for Tushita. And 100, so imagine there's hundreds of deities in that joy, in this Maitreya's pure land, and then the Savior here is Maitreya, and then from his heart is emanated Lama Tsongkhapa. So here, So this is the first actual verse of the prayer. So let's read it. I'll read it in English and explain it. You who emanate from the heart of the Savior of the 100 Devas joyful realm, on the peak of a cloud. So water holder. So the reason water holder is in parentheses is because one term for cloud in Tibetan is chujin. So it means that which holds water. Because rain, of course, comes from clouds. So clouds are like, in a way, they're like a receptacle for water. They hold much water in the form of steam or vapor. So on the peak of a cloud, resembling clumps of extremely white, fresh curd. So imagine like this time of year or in autumn, a very pure, very clear blue sky. And then sometimes there's brilliant white clouds, come in the daytime and the evening. So imagine, very pure. So, I mean, usually in Buddhism, the clear blue sky is that deep blue is representative of the ultimate nature of all phenomena. All phenomena being empty of existing from their own side, and so having a pure nature. And then from the sphere of emptiness, then phenomena arise. In dependence upon causes and conditions, different phenomena arise, they abide for a while, and then they pass away. So just like, and that's similar to within a clear blue sky, then clouds and sunlight, moonlight, starlight, those each arise, but none of them are in the nature of the sky. They're all adventitious. They arise and then they pass away. But the idea is that clear blue of the sky is continually there, even though sometimes it's obscured by sunlight or moonlight. So, and then within that, of course, white clouds are a sign of purity. White is generally, it's kind of universally a sign of purity. So on the peak of a white cloud, resembling clumps of extremely fresh white curd, the king of Dharma, omniscient Losang with your sons, I request you come to this place. So Losang is Tsongkhapa's ordained. When he was about 7 years old, he was given Geshe ordination, and that time his first teacher, Jay Rinchen Gundra, gave him the. So why don't you all stand up for a minute and come have a look at this painting, so you can see like what I'm talking about. Here you can see Tsongkhapa and his two sons, but you don't see the painting, the pyramid. So here we have a very beautiful painting. You remember where did this come from? I don't remember. It might be offered by probably some Lama.
Geshe offered us the white dollar.
But anyway, here's Maitreya. So see, here's the sky, and then this cloud, and then here's Tushita heaven, or Ganden Lha Gyama. So this Maitreya is pure dance, and this is Maitreya Buddha. Oftentimes, Maitreya Buddha is sitting with his legs down in this. So that represents, because Maitreya is prophecy to be the next Buddha to come. There's supposed to be 1,000. In the Sanskrit tradition, 1,000 Buddhas are with fortunate young. In the Pali tradition, 28 Buddhas are with fortunate young. I'm just running recently from Geshe. But in both the Pali and the Sanskrit tradition, Shakyamuni Buddha is considered the fourth, and then Maitreya Buddha is prophesied to be the fifth Buddha to come. So each Buddha, before they come to the world and appear as a supreme emanation body, turn the Buddha Dharma at a time when Buddhist teachings have completely died out. And before that, they abide in Tushita heaven, and they kind of sit like this, and it shows that they're ready to get up and come down to the world to teach. So this is Maitreya Buddha, and then this is Lama Atisha, and this is Lama Tsongkhapa. And then Tsongkhapa's two main disciples, and Atisha's two main disciples from Dharma. And I don't know the other one actually. I'm not sure. It's probably one translator. I'm not sure. But anyway, and then from my heart, there's a stream of white milk out in these clouds, and then on top of that, some Kapa. So Kapa's like Shakyamuni Buddha, vision is. teaching mudra, and it's I'm not sure the name of this mudra, but and then each of them they hold the stem of a lotus, and then on top of one lotus is a sword representing Manjushu. Because Manjushu, the Buddha of wisdom, is typically pictured holding the sword of wisdom. So and it has a flame, a fire coming from the tip, representing. So just like there's a poisonous tree, to make it completely disappear, you have to cut it from the root. From the root. Manjushu's sword of wisdom cuts the root of samsara, the ignorance, of grasping that. Other the text representing Tsongkhapa's deep learning in scriptures, the sutras, the tantras, Indian commentaries, and earlier Tibetan commentaries. And then to the Tsongkhapa's right, these are his two main disciples. There's Gyaltsok Dharma Rinchen, who's I think he's older than Tsongkhapa, actually, but he's usually pictured in this kind of elderly aspect. And when Tsongkhapa passed away, then he was the first. He sort of sat on Tsongkhapa's throne and he, like acting in his place as his main sort of inheritor of Tsongkhapa's teachings and the one responsible for upholding the Tsongkhapa's teachings. So the current, so that's called the Ganden Chiba. So Tsongkhapa's like lineage of teachings is called the Ganden teachings, named after Maitra's Pure Land, and Chiba means a throne holder. Right, so there's a current. So from time of Tsongkhapa down to now, there's continually someone sitting, holding that, the throne of Tsongkhapa, that position. So the current Ganden Chiba is in Goso. No, it's not Goso Rinpoche. No, not John Rinpoche. He's also just a few months ago. Who you're thinking of? Losang Tenzin. You're thinking of Chancellor Losang Tenzin. He stepped down. He finished his 7-year term. There was a new guy in Shiva. I don't know his name, but he's like now it's like the 103rd. But he was Gyaltsok Dharma was the first, and he was the second. His name is Kedrubje, and he's pictured in a much more youthful aspect with one leg down and that one. Here you see he's looking towards Tsongkhapa. They're both looking towards Tsongkhapa, and his eyes are a bit more open. But let's go over here now and look at how they're depicted in the statues. Because Kedrubje is very different here. Here they're both looking straight forward, which I think is Kedrubje's eyes. What do they look like? Very wide open and looking straight forward. And Kedrubje was said to be a native of gospel personality. And he would very kind of forcefully, vehemently oppose those who he felt were misinterpreting Tsongkhapa's teachings or trying to put down or subvert Tsongkhapa's teachings. Also, there was much more kind of you can see in the way kids they write. If he disagrees with someone, he'll use reason and scripture to defeat their argument. Oh yeah, people lost. We forgot them. Sorry, people online. But Kedrubje also he's very sharp tongued. He's a bit he'll insult people and kind of put them down a bit to also refute the views. Whereas Lama Tsongkhapa would never do that. When Lama Tsongkhapa wants to disagrees with and tries to disprove someone else's interpretation, he'll never mention them by name. He'll just mention what they said and then why that's incorrect or why that's not in agreement with sutras or tantras or Indian scriptures. Whereas Kedrubje, I haven't seen him mention that. I was reading one text by Kedrubje on the 3 vows recently, but yeah, he's quite sharp the way he addresses other kind of views. Anyway, so these are the 3 we visualize at the center, but the visualization is more like this with completion. So that's what I was saying. In the first verse, it starts with Ganden Lha Gyama. Maitreya is heaven, and then white clouds, and then on top of that sits Tsongkhapa and his 2 spiritual sons, Gyaltsok and Geshe. Let's sit. We can take our seats. Yeah, so we just have a few minutes left. So I'll just read through each verse and explain briefly. So the first is the invocation. And this is typical, actually, any guru yoga, initially, it's preceded by refuge and the bodhicitta motivation, and then some preliminary offerings and visualization. And then the main thing is, the main first step is visualizing, that guru. So here we're visualizing the guru as Tsongkhapa to invoke, the blessing of Tsongkhapa and the whole lineage of teachers preceding Tsongkhapa back to Shakyamuni Buddha, and then from Tsongkhapa on down to our own teacher. So when we visualize Tsongkhapa, we should visualize my own group, my main teacher, Lama Tsongkhapa Geshe, and his host, Dalai Lama. So imagine that appearing in the aspect of Tsongkhapa, and imagine that they are Tsongkhapa appearing in ordinary human form. First, you visualize and invoke. So when we visualize, we imagine not just that we're visualizing Tsongkhapa, but that he actually is, through the power of his own compassion and caring about us, then he actually is a spirit appearing in space in front. But then from there, it's called the 7-limb prayer, where there's seven different steps to accumulate merit and purify obscurations. So one of those is the next year, requesting to have a stable life, or a bit more accurately, is requesting to remain. So the next verse is requesting Tsongkhapa and his spiritual sons to remain. So it says, in the sky before me, on a lion throne, lotus and mundus, the perfect pure Lama smiles with delight. Supreme field of merit of mind's devotion, I beg you to abide for 100 eons, to increase the teachings. So the last line is the main meaning, right? I beg you to, or I request you to abide, to remain for 100 eons. So for infinite amount of time, in order to teach, in order to teach me, and in order to teach others, and in order to uphold Buddhist teachings in the world. And then the next is a verse of prostration. Your holy mind understands the full extent of objects to be known. So it means everything that exists, your mind knows. So it's omniscient mind. So this is a praise of Tsongkhapa's holy mind. Your eloquent speech is the ear ornament of the fortunate ones. So those who are fortunate, then when they hear Lama Tsongkhapa's speech, it's like an ornament for the ears. It's something that beautifies the ears, sort of way. It's it's quite poetic language. Your eloquent speech is the ear ornament for the fortunate ones. Your holy body is glowing and glorious with fame. So your body is very attractive to see. To you who is meaningful to see, hear, and remember, I prostrate. So it's prostrating to the qualities of Lama Tsongkhapa's body, speech, and mind. And then the offerings. And so then the next of the 7 immeasurables is the 7 limbs is the limb of offering. So this is another way to accumulate merit by making offerings. So beautiful drinking water, various arranged flowers, fragrant incense, light, scented water, and so forth. Actually performed and mentally transformed. Oceans of clouds of offerings I offer to you, the supreme field of merit. So here we, imagine actually performed means the offerings actually laid out, like the water bowls and the lights and the flowers here. And then mentally transformed means as much as we can imagine, skies filled with, beautiful offerings. So imagine oceans of, clouds of heaps of various offerings, and then offer all of those. The supreme field of merit. Because the guru is the supreme field of merit. But that was stated very clearly by Nagarjuna. And then the verse of confession. Whatever non-virtues of body, speech, and mind, especially actions opposite to the 3 vows. So the 3 vows are the Pratimoksha vows, the Bodhisattva vows, and the Tantric vows. So whatever, and then of course, non-virtues of body, speech, and mind are mainly the 10 non-virtuous actions of killing, from killing up to wrong views. So whatever non-virtues of body, speech, and mind, especially actions opposite to the 3 vows, that I have created from beginningless time. So from beginningless time until now, whatever non-virtuous actions I've created, from the bottom of my heart, I regret and fervently confess them all individually. And then the next page, rejoicing. In this time of the 5 generations, you strove for many listenings and realizations, and made meaningful, perfect human rebirth. By renouncing the 8 worldly concerns in the Savior's extensive deeds, I rejoice sincerely from the depths of my heart. So in this time of the 5 generations, right, there's the generations of more conflict between people, more afflictive emotions in people's minds, more difficulty generating realizations and so forth. And also the sort of the richness of the earth and thereby the richness of food and crops is also declining generation. Anyway, in this time of the 5 generations, meaning when it's more and more difficult to practice the Buddhist teachings, you strove for many listenings and realizations. Many listenings means much learning. You hear listening to many explanations of the teachings and reading many texts and commentaries. And then also you strove to generate realizations by engaging in austere practices and meditation practice, especially in retreat. And thereby made meaningful the perfect human rebirth. By renouncing 8 worldly concerns in the Savior's extensive deeds, I rejoice sincerely from the depths of my heart. So this is the verse of rejoicing, thinking about all of Lama Tsongkhapa's study, his meditation, his way of teaching and serving others in composition, and thereby causing the Buddhist teachings to flourish. Then rejoicing in all that is a powerful way to accumulate merit. And then the next verse, requesting to turn the wheel of Dharma, please, holy, perfect, pure gurus, from billowing clouds of compassion and wisdom in the sky of Dharmakaya, make rainfalls of profound and extensive teachings of whatever is suitable for the ears of sentient beings, were the objects to be subdued. So this is a requesting Tsongkhapa to teach, right? Please, holy, perfect, pure guru, from billowing clouds, so motivated by your compassion and within your great wisdom, in the sky of the Dharmakaya, means the truth body of your enlightened energy and body, make rainfalls of profound and extensive teachings. So like the rain falling, please continually nourish us and teachings is most suitable. Please bestow upon us. And then the last verse, the verse of dedication. I dedicate whatever virtues I've ever collected for the benefit of the teachings, means that for the Buddhist teachings to flourish in the world and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drakpa to shine forever. So this prayer, of course, was not composed by Lama Tsongkhapa, right? He would never compose a Guru Yoga about himself. It was composed by, and actually it wasn't composed by one of his direct disciples, interestingly. It was composed by, it says on the cover, composed by Dulnakpa Pelden, who was, I had to look this up because I don't know much about him. He was a disciple of Geshe Sengye. So Geshe Sengye was, he was much younger than Lama Tsongkhapa. He was a direct disciple of Lama Tsongkhapa, but he only studied with Tsongkhapa for about probably between 5 and 10 years at the very end of Tsongkhapa's life. But he's the one who founded Gyume Monastery, where I've been studying this past year at Gyume Tantric College in near Honzor. So Geshe Sengye founded Gyume Tantric College, but this Dungapa Pelden or Pelden was a heart disciple of Geshe Sengye. So they spent a lot of time together. So even though this Dungapa Pelden, he never directly met Tsongkhapa, but by hearing about Tsongkhapa from his own teacher and his other teachers, then he generated great faith and wrote this Guru Yoga focused on Tsongkhapa. And it's said that this Dulnakpa Pelden, by through the power of his faith and his own realizations, then he would recite, you have to read that actually, the name mantra of Tsongkhapa, and by using the power of that mantra, he would heal many people by his faith and reciting that and invoking Tsongkhapa's blessing. So then there's a mandala offering, and then turn the page. So I'll just read these two, the 9-line prayer of Lama Tsongkhapa and then the 5-line prayer of Tsongkhapa on page 12 and 13. So the 12 is Vajradhara, Lord of sages, source of all realizations, Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of objectless compassion, Manjushri, master of stainless wisdom, Vajrapani, destroyer of the entire host of Maras, Losang Drakpa, crown jewel of the sages of the land of snow. The land of snow, of course, is Tibet. To you, group deity, embodying the three refuges, I make request respectfully with my three doors. Please grant your blessings to liberate myself and others. Please bestow the supreme and common realizations. And then a shorter version of that is the 5-line on page 13. Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of non-objectifying compassion. Non-objectifying compassion means, seeing all sentient beings as being empty of inherent existence. And then within that view of, all sentient beings being empty of existing from their own side, having compassion for them. So Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of non-objectifying compassion. Manjushri, master of stainless wisdom. Vajrapani, destroyer of the entire host of Maras. Tsongkhapa, crown jewel of the sages of the land of snow. To Losandrapa, at your feet I make request. And then there's an even shorter, you can make it a 4-line prayer to Tsongkhapa by eliminating the 3rd line here. Vajrapani, destroyer of the host of Maras. Sometimes that's left out, and then just the first 2 and the last 2 lines are recited. Let's dedicate quickly with the dedication verse on page 10 that we just read, bottom of page 10. So yeah, bring to mind whatever merit we've created during this session through our virtuous motivation at the beginning. And then, discussing the essence of the meaning of Guru Yoga and reflecting on the innate purity of ourselves and all sentient beings, our Buddha nature. How Guru Yoga helps us to ripen this this infinitely positive potential of ourselves and others, and reflecting on some of the qualities of Lama Tsongkhapa and his teachings, and briefly reading through and describing this the lines, the words of the Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. So whatever merit we've created by the force of this, may we and all sentient beings be free from every form of suffering, especially the sufferings of sickness, hunger, and thirst, especially where there's violent conflict in families or between nations or between countries, especially in Gaza, in the Middle East, large Lebanon, Syria, and Ukraine, of course, and then other warring countries in Africa, other places, Rwanda these days. May all of these all these acts of violence be completely pacified, and those intent on violence, may their minds be filled with loving kindness and compassion. May all beings practice only kindness to one another, and may the Buddhist be led to full enlightenment. And all those who recently passed away, may they quickly take a precious root. May all of our Guru's lives be long and stable, and especially may this Dharma Center, Choe Khor Sum Ling, hosting this event in the session tomorrow. May it continue to may it be free from every obstacle and have every conducive condition to offering the Buddhist teachings and also secular programs to people here in Bangalore. Sorry to run overtime a bit. On tomorrow.
Introduction to Tantra. Thank you very much for the teachings today.